if we can mobilize people around the world to really care for the cause that they believe in, it always doesn't have to be zero hunger.
Right.
Just the cause that you really care for
Yeah.
and actually do something about it.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you 2030, it's
Yeah.
coming. Hi, welcome to our podcast, The Zero Hunger Project. I'm Suman Roy.
I'm Stacia and Neale.
And welcome. We're going to have really a lot of fun I'm using the word fun, though this topic is not that fun.
No.
It's a very serious topic. We are going to attempt to solve the problem of hunger in our world.
In 52 episodes.
In just 52 episodes.
No problem. It'll be fine.
I have that magic wand. I'm hiding it right now.
If you can do that, I have a bunch of other things that also need fixing.
Yeah, totally. I think so. This is, as I said, it's a very serious topic, very complex. I don't think anyone around this table or you watching and listening to us have that solution. But we strongly believe that the amazing amount of guests we're going to have together, we just might find that solution.
Well, I mean, here's hoping, but we're certainly, we've collected some incredibly impressive people that are doing things all over the world to try and end hunger, at least in their communities.
100%. And especially with the United Nations and with the FAO and the Sustainable Development Goals, and touching on those, having some guests talk about those, I think there is something there. However, I'll be very honest, 2030 is our SDG goal.
Yeah, that's 5 years away. That's not very long.
No, and do you think that by 2030 we just might have zero hunger?
I mean, are you asking my opinion?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Because no, I don't, which is horrible, but I don't.
Yeah, I think when we talk about zero hunger, there is something that I believe we need to keep in mind. It is not just getting food to people.
Right.
It is making them resilient so they do not need a handout or
well, I think it's restoring autonomy to places that have had their agency stripped away, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we're going to focus a lot on is what can we do systemically so people are not going to bed hungry.
Well, and that's the problem because those problems have nothing to do with food. Food has been weaponized, right? So the problems that actually need to be tackled in those areas from a social justice standpoint, at least, have very little to do with actual food.
True. I always say food insecurity or hunger is just a byproduct of tons of other problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And getting to the root cause, if you want zero hunger, which is SDG 2, we want to first tackle the first one, that is no poverty.
Right.
And poverty is in many cases, not all, in many cases leads to hunger, leads to food insecurity.
Right.
And we're going to talk about that. And just like an onion, we're going to rip layer by
Peel
layer.
back the layers, yeah.
Exactly. And get to the main central.
Well, and I think it's important, particularly your background is in food security. My background is more in social justice and sociology. Food security is not an area of expertise for me. But I think it's important to have these conversations, define what it is that we're talking about with all of these concepts, and to have leaders in each of these fields come in and explain what it is that they're doing, particularly for people like me who aren't not necessarily familiar with all of this and who also need perhaps a little bit more context around why this is also political, why it's not just about the food. And to a certain extent, it's not just about poverty. It's a much larger infrastructural problem, systemic problem. And these conversations need to be had. And as you say, we have 5 years before 2030. We should have been having this conversation 25 years ago, not 5 years, and we need to get going because the population of the world is not getting any smaller and things are becoming more divisive by the day. And these are problems that really need to be solved because there are a lot of people suffering.
You're correct. And I always say that it is not just the powers of be who can make the difference.
Right.
It is you.
Yeah.
Sitting in front of your computer or listening to the radio. It is you who can make the difference. At the end of the day, what does most politicians want is to get reelected. And who elects them? You.
Right.
So the power is in your hand. And I think that is something that we're going to talk about over the next how many episodes,
Mhm.
is
52, Suman.
52 episodes.
52.
Thanks for keeping
No
reminding me
problem.
that.
It's just
Yeah. We're going to talk about that because we want all of you to be really involved in that. If everybody does that little maneuver, we will attain a better world. And I think that's what we're going to talk about too.
yeah, I think it's important for people who are possibly feeling a little disenfranchised right now or a little I mean, I know for a lot of people what's going on in the world, spherically is really immobilizing and scary and anxiety inducing. And people feel like they don't have any control over what's happening to them, which is a terrible feeling. Which, by the way, is what people who live in poverty feel all the time. Just FYI. But to be able to leverage your money and your vote are the two things that they're the two most powerful weapons we have against systemic oppression of any kind. And really, it's the only thing we can do. So, when people say that I don't know what to do, well, get informed and then figure out where you lie on the political spectrum in terms of your belief system, and then apply pressure to whoever the decision makers are through your pocketbook and your vote.
Totally. It's we need to get beyond the rhetorics,
Yes.
and we keep on hearing them, and especially now with social media, with
Yeah.
everything we see, we try to believe them.
Yeah.
But realistically, with the AI,
Yeah.
hardly there are things that you can believe.
Well,
You need to be careful.
yeah, you do need to be careful, but that doesn't take away from what we called it this morning, the dumpster fire, the global dumpster fire that's currently burning. I mean, there are a lot of things that are hard to take in, and there are a lot of things that AI is doing that are modifying what might actually be happening. But poverty is actually happening, hunger is actually happening, um, the weaponization of every possible area is happening. And those are conversations that really, really need to be had, not so much anymore by the people who are suffering from these things, because they've not only have had to exist in this, they've also had to advocate for themselves at the
Yeah.
same time. The responsibility lies with the people who have the power to make the decisions and who aren't afraid and have the resources to stand up to those in power on behalf of the people that are disenfranchised.
Absolutely. And we know food is a basic human right.
Yes.
In most of the world, especially we are sitting here in Canada, it's 55 years it has been when our Canadian government has specifically called out food as a human right.
Yeah.
Even then, 1 in 5 Canadians today do not have adequate food.
So here's the thing I find interesting. Here's a guy who runs a food bank, who runs 8 food banks, I think.
Six.
Six, sorry. He runs only 6 food
Only
banks,
6 food
slacking.
banks.
And doesn't think that food banks are the solution.
Not at all. I think the food banks are the problem.
Hmm.
The reason I say that because food banks is a band-aid solution.
Right.
And when you talk to any elected officials and talk about food security, the first thing that goes to their mind is, okay, let's find some resources for the local food bank.
Right.
Let's go volunteer at the local food bank.
Yeah.
So we are putting a band-aid over band-aid over band-aid,
Yeah.
but we are not getting to the root cause.
Right.
So somebody who's running 6 food banks, and our organization, which I started literally in my backyard, Feed Scarborough, we started with food banks. Now we are slowly looking at the bigger picture and say, how can we get to the root cause?
Right.
I want to be the person who's driving me out of business.
Yes.
That's my goal.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in that business.
Yeah.
We need to build a community that's resilient. We need to build policies. We need to advocate for policies that's going to actually help the community.
Right.
And I think that is where we all need to think about, and we all need to have that concept and mindset.
Yeah.
Is yes, the food banks are causing band-aid. We can't shut it today because we are not ready for it. But we need to have a goal when we can shut the food banks down because the community do not need that.
Right. So it's basically from a social justice standpoint, the difference between development and aid.
100%.
And what isn't present right now is the infrastructure to support all of this. So what we're doing is trying to fix it from a top-down solution instead of building a better foundation on top of which programs can be created so that places like food banks are no longer necessary.
Exactly. And we know that especially in schools, in post-secondary institutions, food insecurity is huge. We see that. We I always say that a school or a college or a university, their primary job is to make sure the education is great.
Yep.
But we also know that you cannot have good education in an empty stomach.
Your kids can't learn if they're hungry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So these are just no brainers.
Yeah.
Then why is it taking governments years and years and years to come up with that solution?
Yeah.
We want a better workforce down the line.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the problem with that is that too has become politicized because my life changed completely in 2017 because I had a kid, and I learned all kinds of things pretty late in my life about how that all works. I lived for 45 years without understanding the weaponization of breakfast programs and things like that. I understood them intellectually, but really seeing it in practice in the schools that my son has gone to, where those programs are constantly under threat. And I now know the children who are the recipients of those programs. And to me, it makes me want to go in and burn everything to the ground. Like, before you kind of understood it from an esoteric, abstract standpoint. Now, these kids that are hungry have names to me. They always
Yeah.
did, but I know them, and I can't abide the fact that somebody in some office somewhere is so cavalierly making decisions about whether my son's friends are going to have breakfast or not. I just find that unconscionable, and it's happening everywhere, and it's become weaponized. These after school programs, the breakfast programs, all of these things that are supporting children's learning.
100%. And also, I think I'll tell you a quick story.
Please.
When we started Feed Scarborough in the beginning of pandemic, and at that time, if you remember correctly, the schools were not operation.
Yes.
It was all virtual.
Yeah.
My kid was in senior kindergarten
Yep.
or junior kindergarten. I don't remember.
Yeah.
She was in kindergarten. So I really wanted to see what a online class for kindergartens look like. So it was for the first 4 years, I've been telling my kid, no screen time, no screen time.
Right.
Now I'm saying, no, get in front of that screen.
I know.
And spend some time there. So
Right.
anyway, one day I sat there and watching what happens. And her teacher was amazing.
Yeah.
It was really a whole lot of kids yelling and
It
shouting
was
on
a
a screen.
gong show, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And and the teacher was really amazing trying to manage that.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting and watching. The hour went by and the teacher was wrapping it up. And the last question he asked was, so what is the plan for the rest of the day? And keeping in mind, in schools in Canada, which is more geographically attracting students, I knew most of the kids and their parents in that group. And so some kids said, oh, I'm going to go to the backyard and play. Some said, I'm going to walk up to that park and play. And they were all different things. So this one kid, he raised his hand, which is shocking to me that they would raise their hands. And that kid said, oh, today is the happiest day in my life. For a kid, everything is about their life.
Sure.
So the teacher asked, oh, what are you doing today? He said, the food bank is open. Finally, my parents can get some food.
Right.
So for a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, if that is their happiest day in their life because the food bank is open, we as a society have failed.
100. Yeah. Absolutely. 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 And I mean, that was really one of those things that came out as a result of the pandemic, was understanding how many people were relying on programs that were shut down during the pandemic to keep themselves fed, keep themselves warm, keep themselves safe.
Exactly.
It really highlighted, among a litany of other things, that we're very dependent on the wrong thing. So if that thing gets taken away for whatever reason, everything falls apart.
No, absolutely. I think, and when we talk about zero hunger, we're talking about now let's go to post secondary.
Yeah.
These are the kids who just got out of their home, of their parents' houses,
Yeah.
living on their own.
Yeah.
Um, they have issues budgeting because the
Yes.
fees are so expensive.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
How many times have you heard a student saying, oh, I had ramen today, the packaged ramen?
Yeah.
That's not nutrition.
No, in fact, I watched somebody on YouTube fix a crack in their sink with ramen.
There you go.
I think you can do all kinds of stuff with it. It's really, I mean, it's delicious. Don't get me wrong, but it's also disgusting.
And I'm not putting that link here in the. I'm just saying.
You can
I'm not
Google
putting
it.
that link.
I'm telling you, there's a
you
whole
can Google it,
subreddit
but I'm
of
not doing
people
that.
fixing their cars with Bondo and ramen noodles. You should look it up.
But the reality is, we in an organization that I was associated with called Meal Exchange, which
Yeah.
now shut down.
Yeah.
They were working on post-secondary institutions in Canada, 70 of them from coast to coast to coast.
Yeah.
And when we did a survey in, I think, 2021 or 2022, almost 60% of the students said they have missed at least one meal a week
Oh, yeah.
because they could not afford.
I mean, listen, I remember being at university and I had no groceries. I had linguine noodles and Campbell's cream of mushroom soup.
Oh, that's delicious.
Together at 6 o'clock in the morning. And my mother called me and said, how are things going? And I said, I had, this is what I ate for breakfast. And she said, you'll be fine. It'll be fine. But here's the thing. I have never been hungry ever. Even in those times where I didn't budget my groceries, at some point I eventually got money. And if I were really in dire straits, I had resources to call. There are millions of people in this country who have absolutely no resources. Yeah. So if these places are not made available to them, they go hungry. That's 100%. It. And I think the vast majority of people who are going to be the solvers of this problem are people who have never experienced this problem.
You're so true. And I can't say that about me. I have faced hunger. I've faced homelessness.
Yeah.
When I came to this country as an immigrant. So I've seen that.
Yes.
However, you're 100% correct that most of the people having these conversations or making decisions or signing that order, they have no idea what hunger really means.
No.
They have no idea what poverty really means.
Yeah.
They see it from their lens. And really, nobody can actually walk in somebody else's shoes.
Right.
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
They can try, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You do not know what they really feel.
Right.
It was interesting with Feed Scarborough a few years ago. We came up with this idea that it is correct that people who are making those decisions do not really understand what hunger really means.
Yeah.
So to all our food bank clients, we asked them to give us 8 to 10 pictures, how they define hunger. Mm-hmm. And we took those pictures and we put it on that massive Scarborough sign.
Yes.
And we made it an art installation to talk about when people are talking about the real faces of hunger.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised. It's your neighbors.
Yeah.
It is the person living across the street from you.
It's people who are too ashamed to tell you that they're hungry. You'll never know.
In Canada, at least 80% of the people who are suffering from food insecurity do not go to a food bank.
And why is that?
Stigma is a huge reason of them, because when I want to go to a food bank, I don't want my kids' parents to see me or kids' friends to see me, my kids' teachers to see me. Exactly.
The or whatever,
neighbors who are volunteering. I don't want them to see me standing in line for a food bank.
Yeah.
So stigma is a huge, huge problem.
Yeah.
And with Feeds, and I come back to Feed Scarborough all the time because we did some very cool and innovative projects. Mm-hmm. One of the projects that Feed Scarborough did was an online food bank.
Interesting.
So just how you would place an order or
There's
on
no
Walmart.ca, exactly, and you would just go and do a curbside pickup. Mm-hmm. We do the same at our food banks.
I love that.
So, which is the reason we started was not because of stigma. Let's be clear.
It was because of the pandemic.
Because of the pandemic, we didn't want too many people coming in. Let's figure out how we can keep them outside.
But there's a dignity component to that I really like. Yeah.
Huge. What we saw was brilliant.
Yeah.
Because now these community members who were suffering quietly, now they can quietly just go online, whether in library or home.
Okay, I was just about to say that's predicated on whether or not they have access to the internet.
And we are fortunate in Canada that libraries have internet, libraries have computers where people can go and use even if they don't.
Right.
In this community of Scarborough, which is heavily international and new immigrants, I have seen personally people from outside Canada or North America has a lot more dependence on the usage of cell phones.
Right.
And I know many folks, when they land into Canada, the first thing they do
Is get a cell
is
phone.
go and get a cell phone because they also need to keep in touch from back home.
Right. And I mean, I remember living in India, somebody telling me once, I have no basis for this statistic, but basically saying that there were more cell phones in India than there were public toilets, than there were toilets.
I would agree
some
100%.
kind of statistic like that, where you're dialed, they have a cell phone, but they don't have a place to live, an actual structure in which to live.
And that is the same thing here as well.
Yeah.
It's not different.
No.
When I see a lot of my community members who's on the street
Yeah.
and do not have a fixed address,
Yeah.
a lot of them do have cell phones because they need to keep in touch.
And then, so how did that address, how were the elderly addressed, people who are not necessarily computer literate? They would still go into the library and have somebody help them?
Probably, but also what we do is we made it very simple. We use a Shopify model, which is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But especially in our seniors community housing, there are folks in the building who can help them. Which is amazing because I think that kind of work is needed, that innovation is needed to give dignity back to our clients.
Absolutely. And the other thing that, I think is happening right now is that the baby boomer population is getting older, and they're now all going into sort of senior housing of some description or another. And a lot of people need the help with the technology, right?
Totally. And that is what one of our programs, and we are doing many programs and having intergenerational programs where the youth has a lot to learn from the senior population.
Right.
And the seniors have a lot to learn from the youth.
Right.
So how can we work together to make sure we have knowledge sharing?
Yeah.
And those kind of programs do very well.
I did see on social media, which is obviously the most reliable source to get information out of the world. But I did see that there's a program, I want to say it's in Holland, where they do a lot of really cool stuff where you can go into a library and check out a person instead of checking out a book, which means that you can sign up for an hour and talk to somebody about their experience with whatever they did for a living, and they'll sit and talk to you and you can ask them questions.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
I love that.
I just think, there are all kinds of innovations happening, innovative ideas happening all over the world. And we just need to spend some time seeing how people are addressing these issues, because as we're starting to see, even in this conversation, and as you alluded to at the beginning, this is a multifaceted problem. And each one of the facets is in and of itself a problem. And in order to get to the root of anything, you have to sort of wade through the layers of all of these problems that require solutions of one type or another. So it's good that we're having conversations with people who are tackling this from all kinds of different angles.
I love the story about Holland, and my mind always, whenever it goes, my mind always starts working immediately in high gear. But if you are able to look up our website, the zerohungerproject.com, because that is where we're going to list these kind of innovative programs from all across the world. Yeah. So others can look
and tell us, go online. If you see something that's cool, tell us, send us some kind of a message and let us know if there's something that you want to learn about, if there's something that you know about, if your Aunt Bethany is doing something really rad, we want to know all of that stuff, because the more as a community we can collect this information, the more ingeniously we're going to be able to fix this problem and elegantly 100%. Fix this problem.
Absolutely, because I have no shame, and I'm the first one to say, if I see somebody doing a good job, I have no shame to borrowing
to rip
that
it off,
idea.
Completely steal it. I think. Yeah,
I'm being nice. Come on, borrowing the idea.
Abjectly steal it. Yeah.
Because hey, we can't all reinvent wheels.
Yeah.
If somebody's doing a great job, give them the credit. Yeah. Learn from them. Yeah. And do it. And if you can do it better, do it. Yeah. I strongly believe in that.
And well, that's the first part of solving all of these problems, is that we have to look at it through a lens of community and capacity building, and take your ego out of it and not what an individual can get out of it. I mean, it's amazing that you're getting recognized for the work that you're doing, because honestly, I've known you for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years.
5 years,
something like that.
Probably.
You work harder than just about anybody I know. You have a hustle in you that will not quit.
Thank you.
And it's part of the reason why I agreed to do this with you. I admire your passion and your dedication and your involvement in the community. And I love, in addition to all of this, that you are in fact getting recognized for that work. Not the least of which is because you can leverage that recognition for things that you need in order to get your stuff done, right?
Absolutely. And I'm very blessed. And I'm very blessed because people see what we do.
Yeah.
And I can sit here and say it's all me. I do a great job. That's not true.
It's,
That's
I mean,
not true.
Suman's a badass, but
Yeah,
he has a lot of people helping
but
him out.
that's the key.
Yeah.
I've got some amazing staff who really cares for the community,
Yeah.
cares for the cause.
Yeah.
I have over 320 active volunteers every week
Yeah.
who comes in, volunteers their time because they care.
Yeah.
They don't care for me, they care for the cause.
Right.
And I think that is the big thing. If we can mobilize people around the world to really care for the cause that they believe in, it always doesn't have to be zero hunger.
Right.
Just the cause that you really care for,
Yeah.
and actually do something about it.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you 2030, it's
Yeah.
coming.
Well, listen, I mean, my whole mantra has always been my life, which has been grounded in concepts of social justice, that you don't have to do everything, but you do have to do something. And unless you're part of these, you know, disenfranchised communities, you have a responsibility in whatever capacity. Get your checkbook out, give some time, whatever it is. But if you have the ability, you have the responsibility. And I really believe that. And I know that you believe that also. And I think part of what makes you successful in terms of moving the needle, even in your own community, is that you have vision and you have ideas and you have drive, and then you have people behind you who will operationalize all those ideas. And that's why you've made inroads in all kinds
Thank
of
you.
places. You know, all kinds of people. Suman is also a chef, so he knows a lot of people from the chef world. One of whom we're going to be speaking with, which I don't want to spoiler alert, but I'm super excited about. And you know, I think it's just using every resource at your disposal to solve the problem, and you have absolutely no shame about that. You have no compunction about wandering in to the prime minister, to anybody, and I assume it's part of a UN delegation. He'll talk to anybody as long as that person will help him get what it is that he thinks needs to be done. So, what is your personal mission in all of this, Suman? I think people need to hear about that.
Yeah, I think before I talk about personal mission, I just want to talk about very quickly how fortunate and blessed I am. When I was a kid, I grew up in a place called Calcutta in India.
It's my favorite. I mean, no offense to anybody else from India, but it's my favorite Indian city. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was born there and I grew up there, and I went to Jesuit school.
Mm.
And in Jesuit schools, the days off were Thursdays and Sundays, not Saturday, Sunday.
Right.
And one thing that my parents were both working, my parents were both working. So Thursdays, they were all in school, at work. So and there is no babysitting situation there.
No.
So my parents sent me to school, though the school was closed. They said, just go and hang out with the priests, the fathers.
Yeah.
And there was this one person who used to come every Thursday. We were a handful of kids, like 4 or 5 kids, who used to go to school on Thursday, even though the school is closed, who used to come and take us and go for a walk. And they used to take us to go into the slums in India, go into the seniors living in India, go into the village schools in India. And they taught us a lot. And I was grade 5, grade 6, grade 7. And if I say that name, many of you will recognize. And it was Mother Teresa, who's a saint. And I really thank my stars because she taught me without teaching me about compassion from a very early days. And one thing we strongly believe that, and she taught me this, that you have come here for a purpose, and whatever the purpose might be, and you need to leave. And this is a cliche. I'm saying this, but you need to leave this world a better place than you found it. So that is my simple motto. My kid is 9-year-old now. And the negativity in me sometimes kicks in and says, I don't know if my kid will see the end of her life.
Yeah.
I don't know what this world's going to be.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that she sees the end of her life.
Yeah.
And
the natural end of her life.
Exact natural end of her life.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that drives me every morning.
Yeah.
That I need to have this world slightly better. So eventually we know if everybody takes that one little step, we will have a good world.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that very acutely before, just as a citizen of the world. But once you become a parent, the existential dread of the conditions in which you're leaving your children after you kind of leave here,
Yeah.
it's terrifying. I really worry about that a lot.
Absolutely. And I say this, if you sitting in North America or in Europe think that, oh, we are fine, it doesn't matter to
It
what's
doesn't affect
happening,
us.
you are wrong.
Oh God, there are
It
kids in my
affects
son's school
you.
that are starving
Yeah.
in my Tony affluent neighborhood, comparatively speaking. Like
But
it's happening everywhere.
yeah, but also what's happening in different countries like Bangladesh or India or
Chad,
Philippines or
you know,
anywhere, it does affect you
sure it
sitting
does.
here
Sure
in
it does.
in Canada,
Yeah.
because I one thing I always say that there is nobody who can build a wall that touches the sky.
Yeah.
So it is one world. And what do you say to that?
My whole thing is that, that the idea that instead of we need to take down the wall and build a bigger table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So over the next little while, you're going to see a lot of more conversations like this.
We're going to be table building, folks.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the reason I'm cutting it off, because once we start talking politics, we're going to
That'll be
talk for a few
forever.
hours nonstop.
Yeah.
So
And this
we're
won't
going to
be
wrap
water
this
anymore.
up. Exactly. We are not going to wrap. We are going to wrap this up, and we look forward to seeing you at our next episode.
Mhm.
Please join in, subscribe, do what you need to do to keep track of what we are talking.
And send in your ideas for topics, discussions, people with whom you think we should be talking, what your opinion is, whether you agree with us or don't agree with us. I mean, this is part of all of this healthy dialogue, is having these conversations. We need to normalize these topics and get people talking about them. So if you have something to say, please let us know.
Looking forward to it.
Take care.